Now that we understand domain and range, we want to be able to determine if a relation represents a function. When I say the word relation, a relation is just a set of points, where a function is going to be a special type of relation where every independent variable is going to be assigned exactly one dependent variable. So if I look here at this first example, if I look at my independent variables or my domain, so maybe I list my domain here, my domain or my independent variables being 1, -2, 5, and 3. And then I list my range here, my range being 0, 3, 5, and 1. If every independent variable is assigned exactly one dependent variable, I should be able to match up every single domain value with exactly one range value. So I notice that 1 matches up with 0. I notice that -2 matches up with 3. That 5 matches up with 5. And that 3 matches up with 1. So this is an example of a function. If I look back at my relation here and I were to do the same thing for this, again, listing first my domain, 1, -2, 3, and I don't have to list the 1 twice because I've already listed it, just like we saw when we looked at domain and range. And then I list my range, 1, 4, 3, and 2. The first thing I notice is that 1 matches up with a 1 and it matches up with a 2. So notice that my independent variable of 1 is not assigned to only one dependent variable. So this is not a function, but only a relationship, just a relation. So we can determine if a set of numbers is a relation or a function by going up and setting up this mapping diagram, or a more common way of doing it is using a vertical line test. A vertical line test tells us that if we look at the graph of a relation, if at any time a vertical line is placed on that graph, if it only passes through one point, then it passes the test and it must be a function. So I'm going to go ahead and look at example 1 and 2. I was not able to put the graphs in on 1 and 2 in the software that I used to create these, so I'm going to pause it and put a graph on 1 and 2. Now that I have some graphs to look at, in example 1, I see that if I were to do the vertical line test here, I would be fine. If I were to put the vertical line test here, I would be fine. Here I would also be fine. But according to my definition of the vertical line test, I have to be able to pass the vertical line test at any time. And since here I fail the vertical line test because I pass through more than one point, I would say that this is not a function. If I do the same thing on my second graph, I notice that whenever I draw a vertical line, and it seems to not matter where, I am always only passing through at most one point. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes, this is a function. If instead of being given a graph, I was given points, notice I could fairly quickly sketch these points out. So, creating a graph, I'm going to go back 3 and up 1, back 2 and up 0. I'm just plotting each of these points. Back 1 and up 0. 0, 0, my origin, and over 1 and up 3. So notice if I look at the graph or the points that I've plotted here, never does my vertical line go through more than 1. So this is going to be an example of a function. Just to point out, I do have another option. I could have also made a mapping diagram similar to like I did up on top. Looking at example 4, again, I'm going to go ahead and graph it. I think it's easier to graph it than it is to make my mapping diagram. So graphing this, I'm going to go back 2, up 1. I'm going to go over 0 and up 4. I'm going to go over 1 and up 3. I'm going to go over 1 and up 2. And I'm going to go over 2 and up 3. Well, notice that even though I pass the vertical line test here, here, and here, at this spot right here, when I draw my vertical line, I do pass through more than one point. So on this one, I'm going to go ahead and say not a function. So the biggest thing to remember when determining if something is a function is that vertical line test. If you do not pass through more than one point, you are a function. If you pass through more than one point at any time, we're not going to be a function. Please bring these with you to class, as well as any questions you may have.